Huananzhi B760M. I came across this motherboard when I was browsing online stores the other day, and when I saw the price tag of $55.99, I got really curious and suspicious at the same time, cause similar motherboards from other well-known and well-trusted brands go for upwards of $90 right now. So why is this one so cheap? To answer that question, I ordered the motherboard myself so that we can test it together and see if it can live up to our expectations. Let's begin by opening the package. Other than the artwork on the box, everything seems to be pretty standard for now. I mean, these Chinese brands do like to add quite a bit of artwork on their stuff after all, so if anything, I think it looks kinda cool. Let's see what's inside. A single SATA cable, the I/O shield, and of course the motherboard itself. Now typically other brands would provide you with a manual, a DVD disc and maybe a thank you card as well, but I've never actually felt the need to use any of those things myself, so I don't really mind it too much. Besides, let's not forget how little we paid for this motherboard, cause other brands ask for literally twice as much for the exact same thing. But because that is from Asus or something, people are okay with it. Nothing against Asus specifically, but if you can get the same thing for half the price, why pay double? Anyhow, let's check the I/O of this motherboard. 4 USB 3s, 2 USB 2s, an HDMI, a VGA, and a DisplayPort as well. Pretty weird that we're still seeing a VGA in 2025, but you know, why the hell not? Somebody might find it useful. In terms of the RAM slots, we're only getting 2 here, instead of 4 that you would normally find on most B760 motherboards. But when you're cutting costs this much, you really shouldn't expect too much from a mere $56 motherboard. Besides, we can still use the XMP profile on this, so we are technically not losing any performance here. In terms of power phases though, I couldn't really find any info on this motherboard. I'm not sure how good the VRMs are here, but I can say this with certainty that this motherboard will handle all of the i3s and i5-12400F without a problem. Besides, like if I was looking for a motherboard for an i7 or an i9, I really would consider spending a bit more than $56. But either way, let's see what else the motherboard has to offer. Other than the lack of 5V ARGB or 12V RGB headers, I really can't see anything out of the ordinary down here. But if we take a look at the mounting holes for the CPU cooler, we're gonna notice that this motherboard actually supports both LGA 1150X and LGA 1700 coolers for the CPU. And now, let's prepare this motherboard for testing. For the CPU, I'm gonna go with an i5-12400F because I think it makes the most amount of sense here. We're not going with the most budget option, which would be any of the i3s, but we're still going with somewhat of a budget, but still pretty capable CPU with 6 cores and 12 threads. As for the rest of the stuff, I'm just gonna go with what's standard, like 32 gigs of RAM, an M.2 SSD, and all the necessary power and cooling that we need. We're trying to test the motherboard after all, so there's no real need to go over the top with these parts. Except for the GPU, because I want to do some more tests with this combo later on, and in order to save time, I'm just gonna use my RTX 4070 with this setup and test everything that I need all at once. Let's check the BIOS of this motherboard. Unlike most other motherboards, to get into the BIOS of this one, you gotta spam the escape key, and once you're in there, you'll notice that this BIOS is not only easy to understand, but it also has all the features that you would typically find in any B760 motherboard's BIOS. For now though, we only care about the XMP profile, which can be found in the overclocking tab. And now we're ready to begin the benchmarks. Let's start with something simple. Counter-Strike 2. Now, before we get into the gaming results, I want to let you guys know that testing motherboards is very difficult. There's no real way to test a motherboard's performance per se, but as long as the temperature of the chipset and the VRMs is alright, that usually indicates that the motherboard is working fine and it shouldn't cause any issues in the nearest future. That being said, a game like CS2 is obviously not a great stress test, but let's use it as a starting point to see if the performance goes down as we make our way up towards more demanding games. And from what I can see, this game is running pretty flawlessly. I'm not seeing any dips or drops of any kind, and the temperatures on the motherboard are also alright. Let's see if that stays true in Doom Eternal. Unlike CS2, Doom Eternal is a very well optimized game, and it shouldn't have any issues with making full use of our hardware. In terms of VRM's temperature though, it never even went above 50 degrees, which is amazing considering how little we paid for the motherboard. I also tested the system in Cinebench R23, and all I can honestly say there is that everything was simply functioning without a problem. I don't understand why people avoid these motherboards for no reason. I kinda get the appeal for the ROG Strix hardware and stuff, but when a brand is asking for more than triple the price for the exact same motherboard with some extra and sometimes quite useful features, you should really reconsider your choices. Now, of course, each and every person is free to spend their money as they wish, but the message that I wanna leave here is that you're not really losing out on much, if anything at all, by purchasing this Huananzhi motherboard instead of some overpriced one, especially if you're gonna be installing an i3 or an i5 into your system. On that note, let's wrap up this video. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, I'm gonna see you guys in the next one. Bye bye.